Welcome to the Trade Conference 2023. Now, the United Kingdom, the great international trading nation, opportunities through Brexit. But I think we know it's a bit of a nightmare. And I'm delighted that we've got a team together here to have a conversation with, to discuss international trade and some of the problems we experience. We have two parts of it. First of all, may I introduce Adrian Bond, and I'm going to ask them all to introduce themselves and say a few words in a minute. Adrian Bond is from the Export Control Joint Unit from the Department for International Trade, Head of UK Engagement. And if any of you have done any online training with the DIT, you will have seen Adrian's face and know his voice from those online resources. The Export Control Joint Unit is part of the Department for International Trade, but it is a joint unit incorporating other government departments. And perhaps Adrian can explain it better than me anyway. Then the second part of this is to do a bit of a case study on our challenges with Europe and in particular IWA. So IWA, one of the great European gun trade gatherings, for the last few years it's been really difficult. Firstly, the pandemic, and then secondly, Brexit that has introduced those additional frictions of moving guns through Europe. And what we thought we would do is ask Marleen Meyer from IWA, Nuremberg Messe, the London representative, that's important, you're based in London, so she's here to look after us, to talk about IWA 2024, and then Gary Costello from PBS. What we're looking at as an opportunity, we don't know whether we can do it yet, and it depends on your appetite, but whether we could try and ease the process of moving guns to Nuremberg and back by having a single channel down which we can move guns. So more from Gary and Marleen on that shortly. But first of all, can I ask Adrian, could you introduce yourself and tell people how they should export guns?
So I've been doing export controls now for about 23 years. As mentioned before, we are part of the Export Control Joint Unit. It is a joint unit with the Ministry of Defence and the FCDO. And there are 4 joint units across the government, and we are one of them. And we are the licensing authority as part of the export controls and now the Department of Business and Trade and all the different trade names we've had over the last 20 odd years. So we work closely with FCDO, who have about a dozen of their staff actually based with us in Old Admiralty Building in Whitehall. So when we see the parade ground, we are the building just to the one side of that. And they are looking out for items which are being exported not in accordance with our criteria. We have strategic export control licensing criteria. So all items like firearms, ammunition, go into places they shouldn't go, where they breach our international commitments. Will they be used in ways that we can't condone the humanitarian rights, things which can go missing, those sorts of things. Now, when you're writing to us for your applications, just be aware that the FCDO do not know the right and wrong end of a rifle. They know how the world works. They're politically driven, they understand sanctions and embargoes and those sorts of things. So we also have the Ministry of Defence who works with us, also about a dozen staff in our basement, who know how things work. They know who's after what, why they're after what. And what it is people will need. So when somebody asks for unusual types of weaponry, go to unusual types of places, they'll be asking lots of questions going, what is this for? Why is it going to them? Is it going to stay there, or is it going to end up diverted somewhere and be splashed over the front pages, which none of us want? So they work very closely with us, and we used to be known as the Export Control Organisation, the licensing authority. You cannot get an export licence from anybody else. And our mission statement is fairly straightforward. It is global security through the controls, stopping certain stuff going to certain places for certain reasons. And a lot of that's political. I'm an engineer, I don't get involved in that. But we are here to facilitate responsible exports. We have one of the most flexible and efficient licensing systems in the world. We have been peer reviewed, and we want to encourage trade. We are part of a trade department. We are here to help you. So a large part of it is that responsible trading, and that's why we have training courses, a lot of information on websites, and a lot of support to industry. So I'm head of the UK engagement team, which is about a quarter of the staff of the 80 people who do licensing. And we run all the website information, all the regional training. There's one or two of you who've already introduced yourselves to me, saying being on some of your trainings, and mentioned all our webinars, as well as the information on our website and guidance. So there are about a dozen team who go around organising that and manning our helpline. But we also have our compliance team. Now the compliance team are there to enable an awful lot of exports to happen routinely, those exports which we would probably never refuse. Pretty much like a season ticket on a train. I ask you to go past the ticket office every time, if you know which train you're going to get on, and then you can get on and do your trips without having to worry about going past the ticket office all the time. And so they go around and support about 1 million exports a year. Now we process about 17,000 standard licenses a year, and 1 million are done through the open licensing system. Unfortunately, unless you've got your own individual license, and some of you do, you can't use a lot of the open general licenses because they are there for the less sensitive items, and firearms are clearly sensitive. But what that means is that when you turn up to the ticket office, you haven't got hundreds of people in front of you waiting for routine licenses. So they are there to help you as well. They are there so you can spend the time dealing with your export licenses. The third part of my team are the enforcement team. And so they work with the agencies, customs and Crown Prosecution Service, and others across Whitehall, looking for who's trying to get hold of what. Is somebody trying to get hold of your equipment, maybe lie to you, or are people trying to circumvent the controls? And we'll work with them to frustrate those activities as much as we possibly can. But together we are here to support you and do your export licenses and get your goods out of the door and be competitive. So hopefully we'll be able to answer some questions today to support that particular activity with you, and I'm happy to answer questions afterwards as well.
Thank you very much, Adrian. I think what we'll do is we'll go straight on to the IWA thing, and then we can develop the conversation with all the panel members later on. Now, Marleen, are you leading on IWA?
Yeah. So I'm Marleen Meyer, as Simon said. I'm the UK and Ireland representative for Nuremberg Messe. And Nuremberg Messe is the organizer of IWA. And I'm based here, so I'm your local point of contact for any questions that you might have kind of trying to exhibit or visit IWA in Nuremberg. And I brought a little presentation with me just to give you a bit more of an overview what IWA is all about. So yeah, as you can see, we are celebrating 50 years in 2024, so we've been very well established. We are the only trade-only event, so there's no B2C selling on site or anything like that. We just are purely B2B.
We had wonderful 4 days here in Nuremberg with our IWA Outdoor Classics 2023. We had happy exhibitors, happy visitors, and a lot of experience here in Nuremberg. And we are looking forward to our next show. In 1 year we meet here again for the 50th anniversary of IWA Outdoor Classics 2024. See you!
So yeah, you can see we had almost 34,000 visitors and around 1,000 exhibitors on roughly 84,000 square meters. 53% of those visitors are specialist trade, wholesale and online shop. Yeah, so the top 10 international visitors are from Czech Republic, Austria, Italy, Poland, Netherlands, France, Switzerland, Spain, Belgium and Turkey. so 65% are overall from the European Union. The exhibitor objectives are that 76% want to gain new customers, 60% want to take care of their customer relationships, and 55% want to kind of re-establish and cultivate their representation and their image. And rough overview of the exhibitor feedback is that 96% reached their most important target group, as well as 96% also having gained new business relationships, and 90% would like to come again to IWA next year. So we have a very loyal customer base actually. And this is just a rough overview of the halls that we have, and we divide them into different product groups. So yeah, I'm happy to send that if anyone's interested to look into that more. And yeah, that's just a quote for a 12 square meter stand, which you can see will come to around 3,250 euros. That's for the space only, so that either you can bring your own stand or book a package with us, but that will come on top. Just to give you an overview, there are, however, also new cover packages and innovation products can be displayed as well, so we have different kind of packages. Just to tell you that we are also co-located to Enforce Tech, which is for the Official Security Agency in Armed Forces, and that's just 2 days before IWA, and it's in halls just on top of where IWA is going to take place. And just some numbers for that is that it's slightly smaller with 500 exhibitors and 7,000 visitors, and visitor segments is that 41% of visitors are police officers, and then armed forces with 25%, and yeah.
I'd just like to reinforce the Enforce Tac show. So this runs on the 2 days before IWA starts running. And my feeling is that it's in many ways quite suitable for the British gun trade. We have a strong defence and security, law enforcement heritage, and although we don't necessarily produce a lot of guns specifically, manufacture them here specifically for that law enforcement and defence market, it is a very broad show with all the kits that police and military need. Everything from drones to uniforms, badges, knives, and it's an interesting extra on top of IWA. And if you want any more information on that, do talk to me as well as Marleen.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Gary Costello. I'm the Managing Director of PBS International Freight Limited. We're an international freight forwarder, shipping company, logistic company, and over the years we've specialised in moving firearms, ammunition, and restricted items that maybe some other freight forwarders don't like to touch. We're also an exhibitor at IWA, and we have been, apart from the years where it wasn't allowed and COVID, we've been there for probably 5 or 6 years. So at IWA this year, we had a conversation, Simon, Marleen, myself, about the lack of GB representation in the gun trade. And we formulated a potential idea that we could combine and consolidate and create an opportunity for people to use it to ship firearms and restricted items into the show. So we've actually made some inroads into that, and we have completed a draft sort of proposal which gives people the opportunity to hopefully fast track and have an easy way of shipping restricted items into Germany. So the basis of it is we need to know who's interested, and then we can source an appropriate vehicle and set the logistics up to move firearms and restricted items. We would prepare a carnet, we would, if needed, work with the export license. If exhibitors aren't registered, we can represent them on that basis. And the idea would be to consolidate shipments, to get there together, therefore making it cheaper and hopefully easier for everybody to transport internationally through the borders and dealing with customs and licenses and various other things. So basically we have an idea of where we're going to go, what we're going to do, but it really is to gauge interest and see who fancies it and who would like to give it a go, and then we can actually come up with some hard and fast figures.
International trade presents huge opportunities, but at the same time there are risks. And I can tell you now there are members that have recent concerns where Border Force has started exerting a greater interest in the gun trade. And the National Crime Agency, the NCA, the National Crime Agency, are working with HMRC, His Majesty's Revenue and Customs, to investigate more into the gun trade. And we are now seeing there is more scrutiny, and I think that reinforces the need for us to know exactly how to do things properly. So if you're moving anything that might be considered sensitive across the border, I would take advice. We're available to advise ECJU to make sure that you don't fall foul of it. We've had cases in the past where things which were seemingly irrelevant because they're not controlled under the Firearms Act. I mean, take a magazine. If you have a magazine under the Firearms Act, it's not a controlled item. But the moment you start trying to export a magazine, there are rules and regulations about what you're allowed to do and a requirement for a license. So these are the sort of things where we need to be very careful about what we do. To put something in a jiffy bag and send it abroad, you are at risk. So that's where one of the reasons why I thought it'd be worth us talking about international trade, because there are risks to our own reputation as well as our businesses. But let's open the floor. Can be on the IWA topic or any of the expertise presented here.
Thank you. I'm Mark Newton. I'm the Managing Director for John Rigby & Co. and I had a question regarding exports. This is purely anecdotal and I have no figures to back this up with, but there has been a massive increase in the waiting times for export permits in the last 18 months. I would say one of our best clients in Dubai typically would have been 20 working days to get an export permit. It's now sort of 6 to 7 months. Nothing materially has changed with the type of weapons that we're sending there or with the client, for example. And when we phone up the team at Export Control, who are very friendly, they don't seem to be able to explain why it's taking so long. We spoke with them last week and they said that they would sort of try and hurry a few of the permits along. They were slightly understaffed, I think, but it doesn't seem to be a reason why this has become so slow. And I suppose the question I wanted to ask is twofold. One is, why is this happening? And secondly, will this improve in the next 6 to 12 months?
We will process 70% of standard licenses within 20 working days. So the standard licenses are these ones where you would tell us how many goods are going to where, for what particular purpose. Sounds like those are the sort of licenses you're dealing with. That particular target is set so that the normal run-of-the-mill, the easier to process cases are done within the normal timescales. But we will end up with cases which then are extended as and further checks are carried out. So I can't talk to a particular case. And it sounds like you're doing the right thing, is contacting your case officer. So whenever your issue or your case is starting to be processed, there will be a licensing officer who should be able to get the contact details from your SPIRE, which is our licensing system, and be able to contact them and find out. The problem is, is that once it goes off to our other the advisors, I mentioned MOD, FCDO, we also go out to others, but then the main ones that do firearms, they go off into their world, so the MOD's resources, the FCDO's resources, and we can't go onto them and start, pass on those details because they're doing a lot of work behind the scenes, so I can't talk to what it is extending your particular case. In general, we are under pressure due to the ongoing Russian sanctions, which means that affects all licenses. And so when things are, those licenses which normally take longer than the 20 working days, they will be extended because of all the extra particular activities going through the sanctions and also the Ukrainian support. So there's a lot of extra licensing to do with items going off to Ukraine and the nation supporting them. So, but why there would be a particular issue with a particular export, which sounds like routine, it's normal sort of thing, then I wouldn't know. But contacting your licensing officer will mean that it'll be raised to probably my manager, who is dealing with the long outstanding cases, to look into, because we can't find out why is something happening, and you can always contact through our helpline and say, we are waiting for this, we've contacted the case officer, we aren't getting any progress, and then that should hopefully raise it to the site of one of our senior managers to say, is there a particular issue here? After that, I can't say, there may be an issue, or it may be a processing issue. And hopefully not a processing issue. I know we've been through a lot of transformation over the last 18 months, and one of the results of that, I used to be in a different position, and that's led to turmoil. But a lot of that's moved out very quickly, and all that process shouldn't have affected licensing, so there shouldn't be an extension in licenses. If there is, there's a bump in the road, and we'd like to know why that is. So contact our helpline, which comes through my team, and we can always raise that and see if there's any particular issue. I can't guarantee that you'll get a license approved very quickly. We can't undermine the process, but we can make sure that there isn't something which we can change and get that sorted for you.
I think it's true to say that you might have the same product going to the same destination, but the Foreign Office interest in that country may have changed. We saw it with Hong Kong last year and now Russia.
I would say it isn't just Dubai, it's several different countries. Australia is another one.
Sorry, thank you. Australia being another one where we've put applications in which normally would be 20 working days. They do push it with the people that work with the Export Control Office, but it's sort of pushing it where you don't want to be a nuisance for then sort of being put to the back of the pile, and it is getting to the point of frustration.
There shouldn't be anything preventing the normal flow. So, obviously we do have priority cases and rush cases, but that shouldn't prevent the flow to the extremes, which is you're saying, unless something has changed. And I wouldn't be party to that information anyway. But what we can do is triage that, build that information up and find out if there is an issue, and then I can raise that with the particular teams involved and see if there isn't a bump in the road. I can only have a look and talk to the people there. And if it's a routine sort of thing, if there's a pattern's emerging, I'd like to find out what that particular pattern is. And see if we can fix it, if it's something we can easily fix, because it's no good to you talking to us. Your customers are having problems waiting for their items, it's not good reputationally, and we are supposed to be here to support you. So if there is an issue going on in the background, I'd like to have that fixed. If there's other stuff going on, there's nothing I can do about that.
I'll share Adrian's email address with everyone I know. I'm kidding. Edward.
Good afternoon, Edward King from ASI. It's a twofold question. Firstly, and it's to do with the open general licenses. I am an importer of sporting firearms from Europe mainly. If something comes in and I need to send it back because it's faulty or it needs servicing, I still have to apply for an individual export license to send it back to the manufacturer, because it falls into a category which is, I can't give you the exact description now, but if it was in a more restricted category, or like a military, like purely military, there is an open general license for sending military goods back to the manufacturer. Who decides that it is that there should be an open general license for a military weapon, which I consider quite dangerous, but that you have to apply for an individual license for a side-by-side sporting shotgun to go back to the manufacturer to have a service done or a repair under warranty. Because I find that's contradictory in terms of the spirit of what export control or controls on exports are.
Right, so there's twofold there. The first thing is that you're right, small arms, like weapons, are often excluded from the open general licenses. Whenever you start seeing the included list, like open general licenses are split between military goods by rating, so ML something or other, and dual use items, items which have normal civilian uses but can be used to do harm elsewhere. And so the military ones, they often start at ML3, ML4, and they exclude ML1 or 2 and the PL9, 10, 11 and the firearms regulations. So there is, they're excluded. Now the reason why they're excluded is probably because I'm not being party to the writing of any of them, probably because they are subject to a whole lot of other requirements. There are import certifications and serial number requirements and other checks and firearms regulation requirements and other regulations which can't be easily managed on an open general license. Which becomes onto where do these open general licenses come from. They are there to remove a lot of the easier to manage risks. I can't say low risk, military weapons are always high risk, but the easier to manage risks under certain circumstances. And they are a trade-off with FCDO, MOD and other advisors of how can we remove the bureaucracy for exporters generally, provided they follow certain terms and conditions, maybe get prior commitments and prior approvals. So you'll see things like F680s and exhibition clearances for some items. And then what can we allow? What will the MOD and FCDO allow on this and let countries manage themselves? So it's a lot of horse trading backwards and forwards until we get a list of countries and a list of items and a list of rules you have to follow before you can use them. As I say, they're used over 1 million times a year, and they often come through because business asks for them. There will be a trade organisation that says, well, if you managed all of these, say printed circuit boards is at least one of the recent ones, is that there's nothing on those printed circuit boards. They are benign items going to list of countries which we allow. Why can't you just let us send the goods, provided we follow these terms and conditions? And we say, well, can we manage that? What's the items taken out of the standard licensing process? So standard licenses can be processed. And can those terms and conditions be followed? And then we will probably agree those. So with the firearms, I think there's just too much going on. There's too many other checks and balances for that. I haven't been party to them, but having listened to our licensing officers, our technical officers, and a couple of others, there's just so much going on with the firearms. It just can't fit into those particular items. But what we can do, and I know that one or two of you have it, is to write your own version, and these are the open individual export licenses, and say, this is our particular scenario, we're returning items to these countries, they will be there for repair, we will be getting them back, or they're being returned because we've imported them, can I not have my own version? And so we encourage companies to come with their open individual export licenses for those firearms, and then we can hopefully remove some of the bureaucracy after 60 working days. It's our normal sort of target for those, but not provide it to everybody. Because we know who you are, we don't know that everybody else will be able to follow us. We trust you, others we can't see until we talk to them. So my advice would be to go down the oil route.
Thank you very much. And in that respect, my sense is that something has changed, because when we left, as far as Brexit is concerned, when we left the dealer-to-dealer system, which was done by notification and 48 hours of space between notification and then movement of goods, when that came to an end, and I contacted ECO, I think it was still ECO at the time, they said, oh no, if you want an open individual one, which means that you can send your stuff back to Europe on a declaration basis, you have to establish a strong pattern of activity before we'll consider it.
Right, so that's oils, because they take longer to process, they are higher requirement to check. We require some sort of trade-off. So how many licenses is it going to move from the process, or is it easier just to process half a dozen standard licenses than 60 working days on an oil? But they not only is it track history. If you've got a lot of repeat orders, we could just remove you from the system, give you your own license, or is there a strong need? And so a lot of companies now will apply for oils because there is a requirement to get a license in place before they get a contract, or because you're going to have maybe 20, 30 of these going across the next 5 years, divided by 5 years normally. So there's many reasons why we will process your oil. You'll have to convince us it's in both our interests to do that. With the firearms dealer-to-dealer oil, I do see that still exists in a sort of form where you have to do a pre-registration with us first. And I've seen a spreadsheet where you can advise us of what is going to happen, and then we can get you to a certain point. And so that when it does happen, you can get your license very quickly. And that's, I believe that's through our website, and it advises how you can get this pre-clearance process to allow you to move items quickly backwards and forwards. Not as good as the dealer-to-dealer oil, because we're not part of that process anymore, but it is to sort of emulate it and simulate its efficiency.
Thank you.
Can I just keep moving on, because we've had 2 questions which are very useful because they're quite generic and will be of wider interest. But if we can keep moving on, Adrian is here, staying afterwards, so you can pick up and getting more individual advice. One at the back and then down to the front.
Nick Hume, N9 Engineering. I'm a small one-man manufacturer, predominantly working in rimfire. And most of what we've talked about so far really deals with larger companies. And I wondered what your organisation has in place for small companies without massive resources who are producing innovative products in what I generally regard as fairly low risk area, rimfire.
No, the question to me. So, a lot of the big sort of items, the open general licenses, the open individual licenses, those sorts of things, are to create the space. As I mentioned before, it's to get them out of the queue so that we can deal with yourselves directly. The Export Control Act applies to everybody. It's a bit like the Road Traffic Act. It applies to everybody equally. And so, although big organisations can have a dedicated staff, most of the people who turn up, the 2,000 people who turn up to our training every year, maybe only 30 of them are dedicated export control staff. It's often the sole trader, or maybe 3-4 people, as well as the 50s and the 60s. And so, what we provide to you is that training packages through online material, the support online, the guidance online. And then when you apply for a license, we will treat your license as fairly and equally as everybody else's. And the problem is that you have a dozen other things to do, as well as all the other stuff, and I sympathise and empathise for that. The law has to be followed, so we'll provide you as much guidance as we think you can manage, and provide the helpline to give you that guidance when you need to give us a call and support you. Outside of that, it is the associations we encourage and work with so that you can get that dedicated support that we can't provide you in that niche area.
Thanks. I did actually reach out to the Department of Trade for Exports, or Department of National Trade, local representative at Sheffield's Chamber of Commerce, and I didn't get any of the information from him that I got from you. I was just told that absolutely everything needs a licence, and that was it.
Yeah, so we do work with the international trade advisors, which have come in-house recently around the country, and we train those up like we do others, like yourselves. So they come on our courses. We work with the DSE as well, and to try and provide their resources to give you that information as much as we possibly can. So if you do talk to an ITA and they don't sort of tell you anything about export controls, come to our website, contact our helpline. Watch, as I say, one of our webinars to give you a background, and then if you do struggle, contact our helpline. We've got some really good people there which will walk you through some of the steps if you're struggling getting export licenses.
Thank you very much. Tim, could you come down the front? So, Holtz & Co.
Good afternoon, Howard Russell, Holtz Auctioneers. Just going to the IWA to give you guys a chance to speak, give yourself a break. The channel for moving guns to IWA, given that we have working windows between our auctions, we're probably quite unique, but some of this may apply to other people with wanting new products. What's the lead time from giving you a list of what guns we need to actually getting them to IWA?
So we did do a bit of work on this, and we were proposing sort of end of December, but that is just a rough idea, and that's in case we need to get carnets, licenses, and so on. So there is a bit of wiggle room, but the fact is everything needs to be done, applied for, and in place within plenty of time, so it doesn't cause any grief at the time and a panic, which is the last thing we want. I mean, the whole plan is to do this in a smooth and easy, professional way without having to rush around like headless chickens, which I'm sure all of us do all the time. So this is trying to avoid that. Obviously, you're going to need an export license. If you've already got that, you know, if you know what you're going to take, then my advice is get the license application in well in advance. And for basic carnet takes a week, so that's easy. So, yeah, I mean, there is some wiggle room, but if you came to me and said, we can't possibly do it within 3 months, it's 2 months, then we can have a look at it. So we're flexible, but to a point.
Yeah, I guess our point is that we literally don't know until December before the sale, but that seems workable for us. As regards appearing professional.
So when in December is your sale?
Well, we would have a sale actually at the end of November, and then we'd be consigning stuff for the March sale in December, so we would actually know what stuff we want to bring and display for that would then be in our next sale. Our next problem is that the IWA sale date and our sale date are quite close together, which is another awkwardness for us to cross. But,
yeah, end of December would work. That's within our parameters already, so no problem there.
Brilliant. Any other questions? Yeah. This could take a while.
Thank you, Simon. It probably will. Going back to import-export, I totally echo what Rigby said. It doesn't seem to matter where my trade members are sending something, USA, New Zealand, Jordan, Israel, anywhere in Europe. It seems to have coincided with Brexit, which obviously coincided with COVID, which I think compounded and confounded the problem anyway. Yeah, okay. I think they can hear me anyway. It is just taking months and months and months to get the simplest things to the most simple places. And I understand you have jobs to do, and I understand the situation in the world has changed, especially with the war in Ukraine, etc., and Brexit. What I'm constantly asked is what else has changed? Because obviously we know we're not allowed to send weapons to Soviet or Russian or Ukrainian origin. We know we're not allowed to send to North Korea, Syria, Iraq, etc., etc. Those of us who do this, especially the military type weapons, we know what we can and can't do. When my trade members do phone the helpline, again, genuinely very helpful, polite, no. But it's always, it's with the MOD, or it's with Box, or it's with whoever. And as you said, you just phone in, you don't want to keep phoning and asking. But at the same time, it's really, really, why would you buy British and have to wait months and months and months for your article that you could probably have to pay 20 euros at more for a unit and get them from France or Spain or Germany? It's incredibly damaging to the UK gun trade. And we are now outside the tent. I won't carry on with the phrase, we're not inside the tent anymore. And we used to the EU, especially the Germans and the Poles, and that, like, punishing us for Brexit. But it seems it's our own side now punishing, especially what I know you can't speak to us, on the import side, it's become a nightmare getting anything, arms, ammunition, Section 1, Section 2 or Section 5. In fact, Section 5 military grade weapons, which is what I do, we're finding it easier to get in than bolt action rifles or 2.2s or suppressors and things. That's my first thing. The second thing is, why do we need export permits for optics, tripods, Class 3A lasers, bipods, magazines, when anyone in this country, 18 or over, can buy them? In most countries around the world, they're not controlled objects. Why do we need export licenses for those? And a caveat to that is we all know lots of dealers who just put them in duty bags, or say it's an antique clock, or a car park and send them parcel force or FedEx or whatever, and they almost always get there. Obviously, the bigger dealers, more responsible dealers, those with Section 5, we're not going to do that because we've got too much to lose. But it is incredibly frustrating again. And we just don't see why a tripod or a bipod or an optic, which has no controls on it whatsoever, needs an export license. Obviously, if you have an invoice that says 50,000 magazines, we would expect you to look at it. But especially the smaller dealers, they're selling between 1 and 3 magazines at a time, or 1 bipod, or 1 night vision optic, or 1 telescopic sight. It just doesn't seem to make sense.
I'm going to let Adrian off the hook a bit on this, I think. There's no doubt, Barry, that you and Adrian ought to talk so that Adrian can take some messages back to the department to talk about the imports side. I think you raised a really interesting point about the length of time it takes to get licenses. We assess that in a competitive sort of tender or something like that, the Dutch, the Germans, if they are allowed a license, they will get it very much quicker than we are, and we miss out on contracts because it just takes too long to get the licenses. And I think it's slightly specialist. It's not everyone's bag in this room, but that's something that I think we ought to have a chat about at some stage. Just looking at prioritisation of certain things which could be to great British benefit, not only in terms of the commerce, but also the sort of soft power and all the rest of it in terms of what we could facilitate. And maybe next year we ought to have a minister here, and then we can try and understand the politics of this as well. But I would just in terms of tripods and magazines and things like that, the rules do change, and they change in both directions. So some things get tightened up, and other things get eased. So, for example, telescope sights. When I started 5 years ago here, it was a 4 times magnification limit. Then it went to 9 times magnification limit, and now there is no control on pure optic sights unless they are specifically designed for military use. So it's important we continue to have these conversations, and I think I offer myself to you, Edward looking at oils, Barry looking at certain items. We need to have those ongoing conversations with the department, and in particular, unfortunately, there was going to be a representative from the technical assessment unit. It's those sort of people we need to actually identify the risk associated with certain types of firearms or firearm components.
The background to the particular items which are controlled is that they are controlled internationally. We are part of those regimes which agree those controls. Bazanar is the main one to do with military items and military firearms. And those changes are because they are lobbied. We go and negotiate at the beginning of the year. By the end of the year, if enough nations say that's a good change to make, that's why their optics have changed, because they were so ubiquitous, it's no longer strategic. For reasons which have been known to the Vasanal, and there is a lot of information they publish. That's why those tripods are there, those magazines are there. They're under the Export Control Act to support our regime assessment, as opposed to under the Firearms Act, which has a different type of target. Same with the Official Secrets Act. There's a lot of stuff which is on the Official Secrets Act, which isn't on the controls, and vice versa. There are different acts with different aims. So the Export Control Act, we are complying with our international obligations and then trying to remove as much as we can for routine type activities through the open licensing system. But that's why we have to follow those rules.
Thank you very much, Adrian. Thank you, Marleen. Thank you, Gary. A great panel just to sort of warm us up a bit. I've just finished by saying, remember, there are people watching. If you are unsure about what requires a license for export, please get in touch with Paul, myself, or indeed the department, so that we can keep everyone on the straight and narrow. And Jiffy Bags and FedEx is not the answer. Thank you very much.